So, Aloe, I am so thrilled to have you here today. You and I had the pleasure of meeting, I think it was 3 years ago, at an event called Life Itself, hosted by Sanjay Gupta from CNN. And you're just such a lovely human being. And then I was talking to our mutual friend, Josh Campbell from Worth, who's also a big fan. And so, today, I want to dig in a little bit to your music background, but we want to talk a lot about your new company. We want to talk about some of the societal good that you just sort of eminently do because it's who you are. I think it's the fabric of who you are. But I want to start with your background and doing some research. This is sort of an interesting thing. You started life as a consultant at Ernst and Young, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was right after college. I went to work for Ernst& Young as a business consultant in the health sector. I did that for a couple of years.
So the funny thing is, and again, I think anyone that's listened to you, they see you. Usually, you have your very cool, like brimmed hat. You have a hat on today, but it's just like a sports cap. Did not. I would never see you as a consultant, and I mean that as the biggest compliment possible. And this is also going to sound funny, but I mean it is the biggest compliment possible. So one day you got laid off. I think they were doing some cuts, and the world became a better place because you decided to give your hobby, music, a shot. Tell us a little bit about that journey of going from hobby to full-time, world-renowned musician.
Well, I had started making music at a very young age. I started writing lyrics at age 9. I started recording at 15 and performing live shortly thereafter. And when I went to university, I continued to make music as a hobby. When I started working for Ernst& Young, I continued to perform on the weekends and share new recordings as well. So when eventually got laid off, I decided I would just focus on music before getting another job or before going back to school. And music kept raising its hand. There always was another collaboration or small record deal that I could do that would pay for rent and keep me floating. So I just thought I'll eventually go back to school or get another job, but I'm going to do music because it's fun. And it really worked out after a few years.
Well, I'm glad that you never went back to school, or at least that you stayed with the music career. And one of the things that found fascinating, this is in relationship to one of your bigger songs, but early on as you're in your career as a musician, you got some advice by this guy named Dr. Dre. People may have heard of him. What did he share with you, and how has that impacted you in your career?
Interesting. Yes. I was lucky enough to get signed to the major label called Interscope. Dr. Dre is one of the very legendary artists that helped Interscope become what it is today. And through that relationship, I met and spoke with him. He said that what I should do as an artist is try to find a way to be vulnerable, but also masculine at the same time. And that's where I took his advice and I wrote a song called The Man, which ended up being one of my biggest hits ever.
It's very cool. And there's another very well-known musician that we're going to talk about in a little bit that I'm going to save that. But what a cool experience looking back on that and knowing, how big he has become and Interscope and the fact that he was one of the OGs, right, with NWA. And so one of the things that I do want to lean into is you did an interview with Elmo Lovano, who I hadn't heard of before, but I really loved his interview style. And during that, you talked about opening up for this artist, Bruno Mars, which I'm assuming I've had one of his songs stuck in my head this morning. During that, you get a text from your wife, those texts that we all love to get, right? This was actually for a positive reason. That text led you to a decision to stop touring after you were done with Bruno Mars, at least for a while. Can you share that story with our listeners? Because I really was kind of tickled by it. And it just highlights, I think, who you are as a dad and as a human being because of what happened.
Yeah. Well, I had spent several years touring the country and the world. And the last major tours I'd done were in Europe with my wife. She's also a recording artist, Maya Jupiter. She would open the shows. When I finally had the opportunity to tour the US in arenas as an opening act for Bruno Mars, I decided I'd take my wife with me. But at this point, we were now parents of a lovely young 11-month-old girl. And we had about 25 dates around the US. We stopped in the East Coast, and I leave my wife and my daughter at her uncle's house so I could go do the show. And as I went to go perform, I received a text from my wife that was a video of my daughter taking her first steps. And I thought, man, the whole reason I brought them on tour was so that I wouldn't miss these moments. And it just made me realize time is precious. These days are very um, unique days. Every day, something new is going to happen. I don't want to miss out. So rather than being on the tour and away from my family, and I know I can't bring them everywhere at a certain point, consistency and stability is necessary. I thought I would stay home more than I would be out on tour.
Well, I think many of us who are parents have been there, but you made a pretty major decision. And again, I think it just speaks to who you are as a man. And I really love, by the way, I do have to say with Dr. Dre and what he told you, you were probably the consummate vulnerable but masculine personality. And I really love that about you. I know when I met and chatted with you, I felt that vibe come through. And I mean that as such an ultimate compliment because I think you have people in general that are either masculine or vulnerable, but they don't marry those two together. I know my dad was that type of person. And so, not to make this all about
Mm.
like, let me, give you heap praise on you, but it was something that really struck me. One of the questions I'm curious about, and I get yelled at by Katie Couric when I interviewed her because I asked her who her favorite interview was, and this is probably similar to you when I'm asking you which of your songs is your favorite, and I'm dividing this out because I know you've done a lot of collabs. One of my favorites is the one that you did with ZZ Ward, but tell us your favorite song and then maybe one of your favorite collabs that you've ever done.
I'd say my favorite song is one that I wrote called Daddy Told Me So. It's on my latest album, Stand Together. It's a song I wrote in honor of my father, and
Oh,
it's the story of the relationship that I had with him, but also the relationship that I intend to have with my son, and I hope that continues in our paternal lines. I've recently made that my favorite song. Prior to that, my favorite song was a song called Harvard that I had released on my previous album, All Love Everything. Prior to that, my favorite song was Wake Me Up, which leads me to my favorite collaboration would be the one that I did with Avicii because it was an eye-opening experience. We had recorded several different songs. That was the most successful of all that we recorded together. But I recognized that the words that I put together on this song needed the vehicle of his dance music in order to be the commercial success that it was. And in order for it to be the social success that it was, it required that commercial success, if that makes any sense. The
it does.
marketplace had to accept it, amplify it, so that more and more people could hear it and adopt it as worthy of their admiration.
Well, thank you for that thoughtful answer. And it's interesting because you also have sort of an acoustic or stripped down version of it. And then recently I heard there's a country version of it that I really like, that I think is quite beautiful. And I think you're right. I'm not sure it would be as well received as it would have been without that. And by the way, I didn't realize that Avicii was no longer with us. Like I was doing some of the research and that was a little bit heartbreaking, but what an amazing song. Like I think it transcended the times. And I do have to say, and I think I told you this in the pre-prep, in sort of listening to a bunch of your music again, I've always been a big fan. There's a song which I'm going to encourage the listeners to go out and check out. It's called "Girl, You Rock My Soul," and you did this. This is another collab with Rosso, Sublime. And I know you said that you had not listened to it, but you're going to check it out. Alice in Chains did a very soft EP called "Jar of Flies," and the guitar on that and the guitar on your song are very sort of similar. So anyway, thank you for that answer. I do want to dive into something that is related to your dad, which that was a very touching story as well. And so during COVID or during the pandemic, you got COVID. It led you to starting your own biotech company called Major Inc. I think this was in honor of your dad. Tell us a little bit about that backstory, how it came to be, and then I've spoiled it and I've said what the inspiration for the name is, but that will give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what the company is doing.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I was focused on what solutions were possible to end the pandemic quickly. And I'm very thankful that there were scientists and companies that came together to create the technology that ultimately created the vaccines. The technology had already existed. mRNA was being used as a modality to approach cancer and help treat cancer, but it had not yet been in the clinic, which means in human testing. And that's because the FDA was extremely reticent for this new modality to go into humans without sufficient preclinical testing. And the pandemic was an opportunity to use this modality in a way that could prove that it had efficacy. Now, we all got vaccinated, or most of us did. Most of us still got sick with COVID at some point, but this particular technology wasn't a vaccine prophylactic, it was a vaccine immune booster. And so when I got sick, I thought, wow, I'd really like to find a prophylactic solution to COVID-19 rather than just boosting the immune system after you get infected. Well, I started reading a bunch of scientific papers from professors across the world. And the one paper that made the most sense to me was this idea I had about blocking the virus from entering the cell, because if it doesn't enter the cell, it cannot commandeer the cellular machinery in order to proliferate, to create more viral load. And I reached out to the scientists and I said, what do you need? How can I help? And so we started doing some research with my sponsorship. So it was kind of a philanthropic endeavor at first, but then I realized really quickly that biotech is really hard to do as a philanthropy unless you are in the Bill Gates level of philanthropy. So it requires lots of fundraising and administrative work. So I started a company, and I named the company after my dad, who retired as a major in the Marine Corps, because he's the kind of guy who would come up with amazing solutions for any problem. So that's Major Solutions for Major Problems. I named it Major.
I love that story. And I think, and maybe you said this, but because my mic is misbehaving on me, sepsis, I think, is one of the things that is showing a tremendous amount of promise right now. Yes.
Absolutely. So there was a way to use this particular technology that would block immune signals that reduce the immune response that is party to sepsis. Sepsis can be a cascade of events that happen when you are insulted with some sort of bacteria or virus. Your system is trying to get rid of it by throwing every immune cell type at it. And that could become a problem for your blood vessels and your organ tissues. And that becomes what ultimately leads to organ failure and the declining ability to survive sepsis in a septic situation. So one of the molecules that my co-founder has created ultimately reduces an immune response that could help stave off uh, advanced sepsis so that the medical professionals can find the right antibiotic, or just kind of let the bacteria, you know, run its course until it's done. It's not actually the bacteria that's killing the people, it's the immune response.
Crazy the more you get into these things. And I think when we met at Life Itself, I've lived in the world of healthcare for a while, and we learned a lot of very cool, interesting facts. And so it is always interesting when you learn these things. And obviously, as the founder of a healthcare company, biotech company, you're digging deep into the weeds. And it does make sense going back to the Ernst and Young that that was sort of where you started and you did learn, more than the average bear back then. I do want to ask you a question, and this is something else that just came up during the research. I think it was one of the interviews you were doing, and it was a principle that when you're dealing with people, especially when you're delivering difficult news, you said it's important to be honest with humility. And I love this concept. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you?
Yeah. You know, everybody just needs the, the to be shown dignity and respect. And so I think it is most respectful to be honest to people all the time, especially when people are asking for your honest feedback, opinion, or just information. Now, the humility has more to do with empathy and understanding what is the right way to deliver this information that is going to allow the recipient to feel held and respected. And in some cases, if it's information that can help somebody grow, giving them the opportunity to receive it in a way that helps them grow rather than in a way that will alienate them or separate them or upset them. And that is something I feel is really important, especially in this day and age where we're becoming more and more politically divided and ideologically divided. Offering your truth or your honesty in a way that comes with humility or empathy is helpful and gives the recipient an opportunity to share and hopefully opens a path for a bridge to be built.
It's really profound, and I think it leads nicely into this next topic. So we teed it up. I mentioned that there have been many famous people that you've met, or like inspirational famous people that we know. But what this next artist, Harry Belafonte, uh, talked to you about when you met him was, you said, a life or defining moment in your life, and he apparently told you that artists have an obligation to serve humanity, not just themselves. And let's talk a little bit about how that advice has impacted your purpose and intention as a musician.
Artists for sure have an absolute responsibility. And I believe that because we have access to people's hearts and through their hearts to their souls, we have access to a lot of people at one time. We have a responsibility to be offering sustenance and support. Entertainment, certainly. And I think within reason, that entertainment can be mindless, reckless, abandoned. But I think for the most part, our the opportunity to entertain people should come with ways to also help them grow. And Harry Belafonte imparted upon myself and several others artists uh, that we are the gatekeepers of truth. And I guess there are many ways to interpret that, but as gatekeepers of truth, we have to interpret truth. We have to share our truths. We have to battle against falsehoods and lies that may enter the public sphere and do it in a way that allows for people to receive it. And so I use music. That's my sword. As a visual artist or a filmmaker or a dancer uses their medium.
You have taken it to a new level. You touched on your new album, which is called Stand Together. And I wanted to use this word because it's one of my favorite. REM used it many moons ago, but eponymous, nonprofit, right? So Stand Together is the album, Stand Together is the nonprofit. And the thing that's really cool is that I don't think I've ever seen anyone do this before. You said that this is not an album, it's a movement. And I think you touched on that. So let's dive into this one because really you created this album with an idea of some of the things you've touched on during this conversation of helping to uplift. We're in a difficult, dark time, a lot of negative things going on in the world. And to have a project like this, I think from someone that's had as much success as you have and really tying it closely to this very important cause, it really is quite profound. So talk a little bit about sort of, what went into that and, I've stolen most of your thunder on this one as well, but, tell us how you came to this and how you joined up with Stand Together and what this means to you beyond what I've just stated.
Yeah, for me, there was an opportunity to create an album that did more than just sing about my own personal problems and sort of glorify the the angst of relationships. I wanted to use it to amplify the good work of community heroes and organizations that are making an impact on the most vulnerable lives. And Stand Together is an organization that supports multiple nonprofit organizations. And I thought, what better way to amplify this umbrella organization and amplify the organizations that they support than to write songs? Quite often, I'm invited to sing at galas. I'm invited to repost social media assets about nonprofits, and I'm asked to make donations. But I thought the best way for me to engage is to write a song. It lasts forever. It is an anthem that can inspire others to action, and it creates mantras that, whether or not they lead people to the organization, offer the listener something that is valuable and positive. So in in many ways, I think making the music is a higher impact threshold than the other ways I've been engaging with nonprofit organizations.
Bless you for taking that leap. And I just love the way you think about things. And I guess I want to give people an opportunity, not that it's hard to find you because all you have to do is type in ALOE BLACC, Aloe Blacc, and you can find a lot of your content, a lot of the things you've done, your interviews, your music. But how would you like people to find and or connect with you? And is there anything people can do to support? Like I'm guessing Major Inc. is not a public company, but I'll say go out and buy the album Stand Together, right? And any other things that you'd like people to do to sort of help support the good you're putting into the world.
The one way to find the music is certainly on all the music streaming apps. You just find the Stand Together album. Follow me on Instagram because that's where the most relevant new information will be posted. And when it comes to major or any of the nonprofit organizations, you will find on my social media what each song might be related to. But I would just say the best thing is to go to Stand Together. Find at standtogether.org the list of organizations that they support and see if there's anything that you're passionate about. Could be foster care, could be supporting low income families, could be anti recidivism, could be addiction recovery, and many more topics and organizations. That's one way to support. And then when it comes to like Major Inc., the biotech company, it's a it's a privately owned company at the moment. We are going to be looking for donations at some point, but um, there is a mechanism to support the work that I'm doing with Major. And one is because I'm using my own personal dollars, my income then goes to the research. I and because I don't tour, I enjoy doing private gigs. So if the company you work for is having a quarterly or an annual meeting and there's entertainment attached to that, throw my name in the hat. So I can come and do the private gig, the money that I make there, and maybe even an additional donation from your organization will be able to go to research. And right now we're focused on cancer. We're focusing specifically on pancreatic cancer because it's one of the toughest cancers to solve. And I think we have a really strong solution.
Well, thank you for being so prescriptive. That's a really thoughtful way to have people connect with you, follow you on Instagram, go to Stand Together, download the album. I like the fact that there are multiple causes that they can support. And I love that, getting you to come and perform. I've seen you perform at the Life Itself event. You do an amazing job, and it's a nice way so you can enjoy yourself. Your company can enjoy yourself, and you're supporting research because there's that direct correlation. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to shift into the sort of lighthearted answers I ask all my guests at the end. One's a little bit heavier. We are going to do a turn, and I suspected this because you're such like a upstanding guy. I don't know if you probably have ever sworn in your life before, but you strike me as the type that wouldn't. One of the questions we normally ask is what's the dirtiest sounding word that isn't, but I'm going to ask you a different flavor because we talked up front about the fact that you couldn't think of one. I have a word called it's penultimate, right? It means the second to the
Second to
last.
last. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites. Do you have a word that's just like one of these fun words for you to say that just pops into your head from time to time? And I'm asking you this blind. I've given you no prep. So if you're stumped, we'll let you off the hook on this one.
Wow. Penultimate is a good one. Plebeian.
Plebeian. That is a good one. That is a 50-cent word right there. Thank you. Um, we've talked about some of the famous people, like uber famous people, and Dr. Dre and Avicii and Harry Belafonte that you've met. Uh, of all the people that you've met, famous people or just people that are influential in general, who has impressed you the most?
I'd say I've been impressed the most by President Obama. Um, you know, as far as as far as people go, I think he's one of the most solid individuals, especially to have gone to the ranks of President of the United States, leader of the free world, and to still have the humility, still maintain a respect and just show everyone, I think, internationally what it means to be a leader. That's that's one of the very best examples I could offer.
Thank you for providing that as your example. I do want to ask you one, and this is the one that's a little bit heavier, but it's a personal question, and that is, what's your biggest regret?
Biggest regret is not spending more time practicing guitar.
Hmm.
I wish I had spent more time practicing guitar when I had first picked it up because I'd love to have the facility with it that I admire from my guitar playing friends. But eventually I'll get there. It's just a matter of continuing to practice. I spent way more time writing lyrics and recording vocals, which kind of worked out.
I was gonna say, in your favor, like that's kind of your superpower. So I get that playing the guitar would be fun. I tried taking lessons for a little while and it didn't take, but that's a good one. So thank you. And then the last one, this is a little bit fun, and it's interesting asking someone that is a well-known musician, Grammy nominated. Name one band or artist that you wish you had seen in concert but had not had a chance to.
Joni Mitchell is the artist that I've always wanted to see in concert, and it would be great to be able to see her in her prime.
It's a great choice, and thank you for picking someone. I've had a couple people that have picked artists that are still touring. I'm like, you can actually go see them, so it goes against the spirit of the question. So, um, Aloe, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you so much for being the great example that you are as a human being, as a dad, as a husband, as an artist. I wish more people could be like you, and this is part of why we do the show, is to shine a light on the good that's in the world because sometimes it can be overwhelming. But really, thank you for showing up every single day and being an amazing human being.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Right. We